Hey, this is Jory Delemus and Mac Ruiz, and we're going to take a look at some more of Chris Chappelle and his China Uncensored segments that he's doing, giving us a look behind the curtain of China. If you like this, like and subscribe below.
All right, here we go.
Workers at a Foxconn-owned iPhone factory in the city of Zhengzhou rebelled this week. You can see them fighting with security officials in hazmat suits. Earlier this month, I had told you that many Foxconn workers had fled the factory, some of them on foot, because they were scared Foxconn would lock them inside for weeks on end. In response, Foxconn had promised to quadruple daily bonuses this month for workers still at the plant. But protesting workers were heard in the video saying that Foxconn failed to honor their promise. Foxconn, meanwhile, blamed an internal computer error and said they would fulfill their promises. Workers weren't buying it. Fortunately, Chinese authorities know how to resolve this kind of conflict. Send in the riot police. Although that doesn't seem to be entirely working for them this time, since workers are still fighting back. Here, workers are throwing sticks, poles, and what look like full-on barricades directly at the riot police. And after the brutal clashes with riot police, it doesn't appear to be just a protest against Foxconn anymore. So things are going well. Apple is now saying it's definitely working with Foxconn to address workers' concerns. And Foxconn is actually now literally paying people to leave the factory. Hope you're not waiting for a new iPhone anytime soon. And also, speaking of bad investments in China, Volkswagen. Volkswagen was the first foreign automaker to set up shop in China as far back as the mid-1980s. And it makes sense. Volkswagen has a proud tradition of working with authoritarians.
I'm gonna go ahead and yeah,
Hitler's car, right?
You right?
People's car, I think that's what it stands for. Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So that was the Apple factory. Foxconn is the business, the Chinese business that builds iPhones out of China. The reason that they were quote unquote paying people to work, it wasn't because they were trying to work longer hours. It was due to COVID and COVID lockdowns. So they, instead of, like if somebody gets COVID outside, they can't bring them back into work. But if they get COVID inside the factory and they're already at work, the government's okay with it. So they'll just go to work for, 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time. And that is, it is a government, it's government getting involved in businesses and how businesses operate. You mix that with a little bit of communism and massive authoritarianism. There's a reason those Chinese workers or the Chinese people started rioting against the government, because it's the government causing it. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. It doesn't seem that the government's paying any attention unless the people riot.
Right.
It's kind of wild. I mean, if you think about it, you think about the Black Lives Matter thing, and I think a lot of that was insurrection in a lot of ways. I mean, a reason to loot. But the fact is that the government pays attention to that, and and that's why they're doing it in China. Is obviously trying to get the government to pay some amount of attention to it, and they're hanging on by their fingertips anyways for survival over in China, the working people, if you will.
Right.
And but the wealthier living wealthy lives. So I guarantee you, the CEO or whatever they call them over in China, Foxconn is doing fine, and not missing a meal. And those people are being worked to death, probably, in a manner of speaking. And the government doesn't have a problem with COVID over there, obviously leaving the country, because they allowed it to get shipped over here. And, but they sure seem to be using it for a club to restrain their people over there, which is kind of odd. I mean, if you really think about it, as since COVID originated with them, and it seems like they're more afraid of it over there than we are for the most part over here. There's still some people who feel they need to run around wearing a mask, but But is it in fact, are they afraid of it, or are they just going to use it for a propaganda tool as a stick to beat the people into line? Because in a lot of ways, that's what I feel our government was doing here with our people, as it wasn't their fear of COVID spreading so much as it was keeping people fearful. There's commercials running on TV right now for I forgot the name of it, but they're doing for you can buy your own COVID tests and to keep those tests going, right?
Like
And keep
Binax
them at home.
Binax and companies
Yeah,
like that.
Binax. Yeah, Binax was one of them, and there's that concern that they're going to. I mean, it's big money for big pharma, and I don't know how much of big pharma is being produced over in China right now, but it's huge money. And, and it certainly is over here.
How do you think China is going to continue? How does this play out for them? If their people are not lock in step with them and they decide that they're going to go to war with us, how does this play out for them? Because if their people are already on edge, and then they go to war and you deal with the war machine and you deal with the famine and bombings and, there's going to be missile strikes and it's going to get all kinds of nasty. Does their government hold this thing together long enough to make a real war effort?
Well, a number of wars are put into play because of the government that's in control of that country is afraid they're losing their grip on their people, an authoritarian grip. So they throw them into a war and then rally the people against another enemy, not me, right? The government says, that's the enemy over there, and then we'll all wave the flag and go chase after this straw man bad guy. And but China's pretty tough. I mean, the government is they don't have a problem turning their guns on their own people at all in mass. And but the Chinese people, they're not stupid, and they're human beings after all as well. Not so different than us as human beings. They have families and they want to live a life that's going to protect. They cry when they lose a loved one, and it's not so different than us. But I think it'll be difficult on the government, especially if our government's smart enough to give China back what they gave us in Vietnam, with the same amount of propaganda as they were pumping in over here through people like Jane Fonda and such, causing problems. I mean, it's a big country, and things are so different right now because of technology. Communication's hard to stop. Yeah, and I mean, it's always popping up, and it's like getting weeds out of your garden. You pluck them out one day, and the next day you come back, there's more. It's like, where do you come from? You weren't here yesterday, but it's always popping up, and so unless they can stop the communication flow, they'll have trouble. They'll certainly have trouble, but they'll come down hard. They'll come down ways that some in our government would like to come down on American people when they're not towing the line as far as they're concerned by letting them have free reign over their lives. China will absolutely maximize their force. And there was in the 60s, I think it was, as we thought they were amassing 1 million troops on the border on China, but it turned out it was just bodies who had died of starvation because we're having a famine. And their satellite, I think it was U2 photographs are the ones that revealed that. And so China is not opposed to using monstrous force and against their own people. And the more afraid they are, the more force they use. I mean, you see it in our government right now with the January 6th thing is they're trying to keep people looking at people who want to support the Constitution, want to live a free life and just go to work and not be a puppet for the government as they aim their gun sights at them. And, that's what they do. And they try to scare the rest of society into obedience. Yep.
All right. Well, there's our coverage of China Uncensored, one of their articles from last week. Like and subscribe down below, guys, and see you guys on the next one.